Okay, fair enough. I want to build on the exact, precise example you just used. We got the plowers out here in Worcester, we got it raining in Boston, and it's the unions that prevent common sense from logically solving the issue.
But it's the contracts.
Do we need to break the union? I mean,
no,
how
it's
do we
the
do
contracts negotiated by the unaccountable closed system of the Turnpike Authority for years. Look, those unions have contracts that they negotiated. And I'll say again, I've said this over and over, I don't blame unions over the years for negotiating contracts that were great for their members. That's what union leadership is elected to do. But our government is elected to represent the best interests of the taxpayer and the toll payer. And so we have contracts that exist right now. Those contracts would be nullified by elimination of the Turnpike Authority and rolling those employees into Mass Highway, where they'll be subject to a new contract, which hopefully will be more rational.
Under a different unionship?
I don't know. No idea.
Carolyn?
I stand by what I said, and the question originally was about merging the two authorities. I've heard a lot of inefficiencies. A couple of them related to tolls could be addressed without a merger and should be before agreeing whether or not to support a merger. I want to see the numbers. I want to see specific savings. There have been suggestions made that while there may be some slim savings, there may be inefficiencies created in other areas through a merger. I just want to see the information before I, come out and commit one way or another.
And I just can't understand how someone runs for office in Metro West and takes as their first premise, well, you need to prove to me that eliminating the Turnpike is a good thing. I'm going to assume it's not until you prove it. I just don't get that. That is not what I hear from the voters out here. And aside from my experience, I do know that it makes all the sense in the world to eliminate the Turnpike Authority. And the governor agrees now, and I'm glad to see that. I know, Carolyn, you're going to see the governor tomorrow. Maybe he can explain to you and convince you why it is that idea makes sense. I hope you'll ask him about it.
So you would support that even if it did, in fact, cost the state money through additional inefficiencies that were created?
I see absolutely no reason to think that it would cost the state money, but...
Have you seen the numbers to suggest that?
Yes, Carolyn, I've seen the numbers. I was just talking about it, but...
Well, I haven't heard numbers, though. I've heard anecdotal comments.
You referenced the
I'm
study
not sure you're listening, but...
You referenced the study from KPMG.
Well, it was a government study that KPMG helped with. It was conducted by the executive office of the governor. But the point being, I start from a premise that says our district, our region, is getting creamed to our detriment and to the benefit of the rest of the state. We ought to undo that. A surefire way to undo that is to eliminate the tolls. That's the only surefire way to do that. This kind of talk is what we get on Beacon Hill. This, well, we need to look at the numbers and we're going to have to do a review and let's lay it all out and kick the can down the road. And as that happens, the inevitable result of that, to say we need to wait longer and analyze more, is to say to our voters, you need to continue to pay higher and higher tolls, because that is what happens. That is what has to happen. Our tolls are about to double, and that has to happen, because under the current situation, the Turnpike Authority is obligated to pay its debt obligations, and in order to do that, they need to double our tolls. The only way we're going to end that is to end the Turnpike Authority, roll that debt into make it an obligation of the Commonwealth, as it should have been to begin with.
Okay. Clear. And a related question, and this one comes from one of our readers as well. How would you encourage communities in this district to address their infrastructure problem? As we know, throughout the state, there's hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, we have all kinds of immediate needs that need to be addressed now. And there's been some talk that addressing the infrastructure would be one of the best ways to help the economy, because it would put an awful lot of people to work and work immediately. What initiatives do you see, or could you see, that Hopkinton, Holliston, Westboro, Southboro could embrace to help us locally? Dan?
Well, this in a very significant way ties in again to what I've been saying all along, which is that the government, our government, needs to set true priorities. The most overused word in the State House is priorities. Anything any individual legislator wants to spend money on, they label a priority. To say, how do we encourage towns to address their infrastructure? Well, towns have every incentive in the world to address their infrastructure, and we live in towns here in the 8th Middlesex District that have very open processes where people can see how money is spent. The meetings are open, people can speak with their selectmen and their board chairman to determine how they're spending their money and why. At our state level, we have a very closed system, and not enough money comes down back to the local level. We ought to, but to give the answer its due and actually answer it, there ought to be incentives to cities and towns to institute rigorous capital budgeting procedures where projects are chosen on the basis of statistical analyses of long-term cost-benefit, safety issues, the incremental cost of not doing something over long term as compared to other projects. And this is a process by which things can be ranked and rational decisions could be made. I know I was very heartened to hear last night at Holliston's town meeting, a question was asked about a proposed sidewalk project on Central Street, which my house happens to border Central Street. It definitely needs a sidewalk, but Carl Damigella of our Board of Selectmen very carefully explained the way in which the town needs to assess each project by itself and then compare rather than simply allocate funding to projects based on which town official lives in the neighborhood or who it will help politically. The problem with our state system right now is that all too often our dollars, again, in the current situation last year, we had $1 billion surplus, and they spent it into $1 billion deficit. And I guarantee you, Holliston, Hopkinton, Westboro, Medway, and Southboro didn't get significant infrastructure dollars out of that $1 billion in binge spending. The legislature literally went behind closed doors and added earmarks to the budget in a closed process. $220 million of earmarks that they then throw out onto the House floor and vote for on an omnibus basis, meaning we vote for all of this big pile of things, yes or no. That means we don't get to see the process by which they allocate those funds. We don't get to see whether there was a rigorous statistical analysis.
They've just given me, sorry, I apologize for interrupting you. They've just given me a notice. I've lost sense of the time. I want to give you a chance to respond to what he was saying, and then I want to ask you to wrap up with 90 seconds. Did you want to respond to his last response?
Sure. Well, in the interest of time, I'd like to just answer the question myself as opposed to responding to Dan, although my one response would be I'm glad to hear that Dan is talking about long-term cost-benefit analyses for rational decision-making, because that was exactly the point that I was trying to make related to the merger of the Pike and the Mass Highway. Related to creative solutions for maintaining our infrastructure, I think towns, clearly infrastructure maintenance and costs have been very burdensome for towns, are continuing to grow. And one of the things that I've mentioned from the very beginning of this campaign is the need to look long-term, and for our towns and our state to work with our towns to look for ways for our communities to work together to share some of these infrastructure expenses. To offer incentives at the state level for when we create infrastructure, when we build new buildings, when we create water infrastructure, that kind of thing. If there are opportunities to work together so that we can share the costs of both the construction and the maintenance, we're able to do that, and then hopefully spread those costs over the towns and have less for each town to pay. And I think going forward, that makes a lot of sense long term, and it will save our towns a lot of money, again, over the longer term.
Okay, I apologize for that oversight on that.
Sure, not at all.